Welcome to the Echo Essentials podcast. My name is Chris Pekarski, and I'm back. I'm back in the podcast studio to record today's episode, which was we had Dr. David Tabachnick in from Nipissing University in to chat with us a bit about some provincial politics, not federal this time, but provincial. Talk a bit about mostly about Doug Ford as a figure in his recent kind of shift from maybe being classical populist, maybe going more of an elitist. It was a really good conversation, as I always say. We talked a bit about Bill 33, Bill 60, a bit of the comparisons with Donald Trump and everything else. It was great. I mean, Dr. Tabachnick's always awesome to have in here. At this point, I feel like he's going to become like a regular, contributor to the show, as he should be. He's awesome. So strap in. It's a great conversation. Nice to be back. And I'll throw it to us in a minute. Before I get to all of that, I do want to throw it and thank our title sponsor of today's show, Source for Sports.
It's almost that time of year. Early mornings at the rink, fresh notebooks and backpacks, and a community gearing up for another great season of varsity sports. At Source for Sports North Bay, we're proud to be part of it all. Whether it's finding your kid's first pair of skates, gearing up for tryouts, or outfitting your team for the season ahead, we've got you covered. Because here, we're not just a sports store, we're neighbors, coaches, teammates, and fans. And we're proud to cheer you on every shift, step, and stride of the way. Visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street, and let us help you along your way.
We have back in friend of the show, political commentator, professor at Nipissing University, Dr. David Tabachnick. Professor, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks very much. Having me back.
We're always happy to have you back. It's been a bit. I feel like the last time we had you in was the post-federal election wrap-up, and before that, it was the pre-election coverage that we had.
I know, that was what, a few years ago?
It's, sometimes it feels that way. When my beard goes gray and I keep losing all two of my hairs, it feels like it's further along down the way.
Yeah.
But I guess that would have been, in May, I guess?
It was a while ago. I can't quite remember when we did our post-election coverage, but it was a while ago. And it's quite interesting. Yeah, Carney was, of course, in the news today as well.
It's true,
This pipeline announcement. So
he signed
that's quite something.
Signed something with Danielle Smith today.
That's right. So, this is part of his sort of move to the center, I would say. I know we're going to be talking about Ontario politics, but his move to the center, in a way, he's been quite artful, taking any talking point away from the conservatives. You're against pipelines? No, I'm not. I'm for pipelines. You have a carbon tax? No, I don't. I've gotten rid of that particular part of the carbon tax, and it's really served him quite well. And I can imagine as Pierre Poilievre is going up for a leadership review
in January.
Yes, that's right. He is looking for some traction, and I don't think the Conservatives have found their issue with Carney yet.
So we are going to talk about provincial, only because we've had you talking about federal before, but we're here. Let's just keep going a little bit further if we can.
Okay.
So you talked a bit about Pierre Poilievre, and people who watch the show know that we have this last, 7 months of history of criticizing him, or at least the absence of him, and now he's back in the fold.
Right.
And he's looking at potentially getting, continued success or continued presence as the leader of the party. But the party itself, whether it's in, relation to Carney kind of being a centrist or winning over the hedge voters, some of them have kind of moved away from the federal Conservative Party. Whether it was I think we had one MP who stepped down. We had one MP walk across the room. It feels like the walls are kind of shakier than they were 6 months ago when it was quiet. But now that things are active, it feels like they're getting shaky again.
Yeah, I think that the election result, of course, was a devastating blow for Poilievre. That goes without saying. Losing his own seat was bad. I think that's one of the things we talked about when we last met, was that where would he run in a by-election? You did say in Alberta, and I sort of said, well, that would be a sign of weakness. And
lo and behold,
there he is in Alberta, of course, winning handily, but it did show that he is a little nervous about his electoral success across the country. So he went into this safe seat. So I think right from, day one after the election, he was on shaky ground, and things have not gotten much better for him. The only saving grace, I think, is no one has come out of the woodwork really to challenge him. And that's the question. Is there anyone on his bench or somebody in the shadows, if you will, waiting to sort of challenge him for the leadership? And, we'll see. I mean, if he does not do well, and generally well would be 80% and above, although 80% is kind of shaky, if he's in the 70s, let alone the 60s, hanging on would be very hard for him. So something to pay attention to, for sure.
So, you know what? Because we'll refocus, but I'm going to make a nice segue. Hopefully you guys can appreciate this. Talk about those lying in the shadows, maybe in the shadows of Ontario. Our big conversation today is going to be talking about our premier, Doug Ford, who, I mean, am I making a reference to the fact that, he's now won kind of, what is it 2 re-elections or 1 election?
Three majority governments.
Right. Two of which were kind of fast punches with someone who hadn't had the guard up,
Yeah.
And then it's well, what's next for him? And people have speculated before what we're going to talk about today, that he might have future bigger aspirations, but that's where that connection comes from. But Doug and his crew have been very active in the media lately.
Yes, for sure.
And so I think it's fun because I would say, as you mentioned, outlined earlier in our little pre-conversation, he's been kind of platforming himself as a bit of a populist. Being a man of the people, so to speak, or which is interesting because when you get into his familial history, they were very well off.
That's right.
But he's done well to kind of earn the general average person on the street's approval for the most part. But lately, he's been doing some fast moves, some powerful moves that might shake some of that base.
That's right. And I think that there's a bit of a tension there. I mean, certainly, Doug Ford, just sort of in his public image and his personality, does come off as an everyman. But you're right, his biography doesn't really suggest that. His father, of course, was an MP. He was from a very sort of wealthy family, a successful family. While he did work, outside of the family business a little bit, for the most part, his professional life has been with the family business. And the comparisons to Donald Trump, although something that Doug Ford wouldn't appreciate perhaps today post these tariffs, have been made. And at one time, he quite liked that comparison. And indeed, Donald Trump, from an extremely wealthy family, and really worked within the family fold his entire life, and does come off as a populist as well. So it is quite interesting that these people from sort of elite positions in our society are able to brand themselves as populists. And certainly voters go for it. They, of course, elected Donald Trump twice, although he did lose one election in between there. Although he claims he did not lose. And then, of course, Doug Ford has been tremendously successful at the polls as premier.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. I never fully, if I could just insert myself into the show a little bit, I've never fully understood how, individuals like Ford, and especially like Trump, have been able to position themselves as everymen when they are so far removed from what I and most of us I would consider to be our modern reality, where the challenge that they face, especially someone like Trump, I couldn't even fathom. Right, that's not even quite comparable. But yet they will rally the blue collar voters in a way like you've never seen before.
That's right. And both Ford and Trump, surprisingly, have got a lot of working class votes, which understandably has been the sort of electoral base for leftist parties, whether the Democratic Party in the United States or the NDP here in Canada or Ontario. And they've done it in a way on cultural issues rather than on economic issues, even though some of these economic issues have come to the fore more recently. I think the argument that a lot of people on the right make is that the left is kind of obsessed with these woke issues. That term woke is used much more by conservatives than anyone on the left. And it is really used as a cudgel or a wedge, to mix my tool metaphors here.
I like that. Yeah.
To sort of make claims that if you are for equal rights, let's say for transgender people, for example, that somehow this is out of the mainstream, that you are really a marginal person, and most people don't care about those sorts of things. And in a sense, not to insult working class people who I'm sure many do support transgender rights, it's probably not at the top of their minds when they go into the voting booth. They care about things like affordability, relatedly things like inflation, obviously concerns about employment and housing. Those are the top of mind concerns. And so as the left has or had focused more on these cultural issues and then less on these economic or pocketbook issues, I think the right really took advantage of that. But I think that was really just a moment. If a party like the NDP, whether provincially or federally, can return to its labor roots, return to its working class roots, its blue-collar working class roots, I think that they can sort of turn their fortunes around. But you're right. The Progressive Conservatives in Ontario certainly have taken those voters and put them solidly in a Progressive Conservative or Tory docket, and it is quite amazing in that sense. So is Doug Ford really a populist? Is he somebody who actually understands the working man and the working class? He certainly comes off that way. I mean, again, image is reality in many instances in politics, and he really pulls that off. And again, I hope this doesn't come off as an insult to him, but the way he speaks, I don't think anyone would claim that he is like a elitist or an intellectual. Right. And so
don't worry, I don't think he's watching the show, but if he is,
that's right. But
Premier.
Even his supporters might take that as an insult. But I mean it in a way opposite to that he has that sort of touch to the everyman. And, even his time at City Hall or in the municipality when he was a city councillor in Toronto, he was well known for that sort of thing, as was his brother.
So was his brother, yeah.
Yeah, you can phone me up at any time. Here's my phone number. Let me help you shovel out that snowbank.
Try.
Yeah, exactly. You got that pothole in front of your, on your street. Let me deal with that immediately. Like, again, are those really important issues that a city councilor should be focusing on? Probably not. But is it an effective way to be a politician and run campaigns? Very successful.
Awesome posturing.
Yeah, it really works very well. So he has some populist credentials, but again, many of the things he's done as a premier are not populist at all. Quite elitist, in fact, and taking power away from the people rather than, of course, giving it back to them as a populist claims they're going to do.
So let's make this really clear. Just because I think we've used the terms a couple different times, let's define both just so we can understand what makes them different and why people might be seeing a change in Doug. So let's go through, and I'm going to get you to define both.
Okay.
Can you define populism for us first, and then get to elitism and maybe how Doug has transitioned into that?
Okay, yes. Okay, so populism, I think, is broadly defined as sort of anti-establishment in a certain sort of way, right? So we have certain institutions, whether they're educational institutions, whether they're the public service, whether they're even corporations in the private sector, and they have kind of run the economy and I guess the public realm pretty much from on high. And the idea would be that people of a certain education and a certain level of income know better than everybody else. And for a time, actually, Canadians kind of accepted that notion that people of high standing were there for a reason and that they could be told what to do by those people, and those people had their best interests in mind. Now, we know that in many instances that has not worked out, that we have seen tremendous corruption and failures from the elites on this level. So, just to sort of think about when a lot of this gained momentum, at least more recently, is the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah.
You look at the 2008 financial crisis, even though it didn't hit Canada as hard as most other places, you kind of said, you've all failed us. Whether you were in the Oval Office or on Wall Street, this whole notion of too big to fail, that you deserve these multi-billion-dollar bailouts because you screwed up so badly, that is just red meat. It's a great battleground, if you will, for someone like Donald Trump. He sort of saw the lay of the land there and said, this is my chance, in fact, to brand myself as against those corrupt, failed elites. So even though he's a billionaire or claims to be a billionaire, I think he's a billionaire now, if I understand what's been going on.
Yep.
He could sort of say, I'm above the fray. I'm not one of them. I'm more interested in you and your success. And, he was a different face. He certainly wasn't an established politician. He certainly behaved and talked quite differently than politicians we were used to. And he kind of understood something that these other politicians didn't get. And he really took advantage of that incredible resentment, that sense of grievance that people rightly had against the people in power. And he said, I'm going to drain the swamp, right? And Doug Ford has done something of the same kind that people looked at, for example, the governing Liberals, the Natural Governing Party, as they're sometimes called, and said, look, you've brought Ontario down low. You've created all these deficits and debts. Our healthcare system is in tatters. Our education system is in decline. Again, whether that's measurably true or not doesn't matter. It's what people thought and think. And so he said, I'm going to end the gravy train. That's another thing that he has done. And, he just has that folksy way of presenting his ideas. He's excellent on the stump, and he can really, get people's attention. And, he can point fingers and say, it's those people's fault. It's Dalton McGuinty's fault. It's Kathleen Wynne's fault. And in some ways, he was right. And so that's his original electoral success. The problem, of course, comes when you claim you're a populist and then you've been in office for a very long time. Right? I think, 2018, now we're close to 2026. That's a pretty long time to be in office. And so how do you keep in touch with the everyman when you are sitting there in the premier's office, when you're, leading legislation in Queen's Park, pretty much without opposition? Well, you're the elite now in many ways. So it's a bit of a tension. And we have seen actually some of that elitism in his legislation. So, just to sort of point out some things that have happened recently, is it Bill 60?
Yep.
Bill 60, this makes reforms to the Landlord-Tenant Act. And again, reality and rhetoric differ here. But if you're for the working class, if you're for the working man, why would you then put them in a position where they can be evicted more easily from their apartments and housing?
Yeah.
Again, I understand there's lots of trouble with the Landlord-Tenant Board, and if I was a small, owner of, apartments, a small landlord is what I'm trying to say, if you understand what I'm saying, like a small businessman in that
mom
sense.
pop landlord. So
exactly. I can understand that they would be very frustrated with that system if they had a tenant that wasn't paying their rent. But more broadly, of course, this takes rights away from people who are working class people who are living paycheck to paycheck. Those are the people who voted for Doug Ford. And what does he say to them? He says to them, go get a job.
Oh my gosh. Can we talk about that too?
Yeah, sure.
What we're referring to is Bill 60, which is, as Professor mentioned, outlines changes to, it's I say disguised. I mean, that's not quite fair, but it's meant to try to increase, or it's aimed at improving overall infrastructure to help build more homes or renter.
Yeah, there's quite a bit in the bill.
That's what it is. Yeah. But really, it looks like it's trying to cut away some of the processes and the due rights of those who are protesting at the expense of the tenants themselves, obviously. Because a lot of what it did was cut a lot of times and processes in half.
Right, that's right.
To make these kinds of things work. And what you're referring to is go get a job, that there was a protest group outside of Queen's Park and in the gallery. In the gallery of the exactly. And they were calling out to him, and he retorted with "Go get a job."
That's right.
Which was I feel like that's when the mask truly started to slip.
Well, exactly. And I think that really matters in politics. We've been talking about image and rhetoric being very important in politics. That's no surprise. But is that a turning point? Now, I'm certainly going to have to think about that quite a bit more, and we'll have to just see.
Yeah.
But to me, that's actually totally against brand for Doug Ford to say people that are worried about their housing situation, their employment situation, just to sort of say, pick yourself up by the bootstraps and go get a job. What's your problem? No, that's not the circumstances, right? If you're a populist, it's not my fault, right? It's the elite's fault. Why are Why is it so hard to find housing? Why is it so expensive? You can't blame someone working a minimum wage job for those problems.
No.
And yet, that's what he says. Go get a job. Well, you know what? I bet you people have 3 jobs and they still can't make their rent. And so he's not making it any easier for them. So again, whether the legislation is good or not, whether it is needed or not, and indeed I understand that this system, the Landlord-Tenant Board, has worked terribly over the last number of years.
It's not a great experience.
So needs reform.
Yeah.
That's not so much the point I'm making. What I'm saying is that it's really going against his brand to do something like this. And then somewhat relatedly, Bill 33 is doing something the same. It is trying to take sort of the influence of local communities out of how school boards function, right?
Right.
Allowing the minister for reasons of public interest.
I hated that.
Which is just the most...
So broad.
Yeah, it could be anything, you know. I don't like, you know, the way you look today, so that's a reason for public interest. And essentially taking over school boards. And democratically elected trustees are kicked out. And certainly our school board here, the near North District School Board,
It's definitely been in the public eye lately.
has been in the public eye, and I'm certainly sure, in fact, we know for sure that is on the minister's mind to take over that board, as has actually happened in 5 other boards in Ontario for financial reasons.
TDSB, Ottawa, Carleton, for example.
Yeah, that's right. So that, again, and the point I'm trying to make is that's a centralization of power, that's less democracy, it's less populism. Now, again, we could say it is, in fact, something that needs to be done, that these school boards are functioning terribly. And indeed, some of the decisions the Near North District School Board have made, at least from my perspective, sitting in my living room reading stories about it, suggests that something is amiss. I think a lot of the trustees may agree with me.
I think they would.
But again, they're people that have been duly elected by the people of this region to represent our interests when it comes to our children's education. And do we really think that a minister sitting in Toronto in Queen's Park is going to do a better job, or a supervisor that he appoints undemocratically, of course, will do a better job? I kind of doubt it. So I think it's a very challenging thing to run a school board when budgets are so tight, when forecasting is so difficult when it comes to the numbers of students and number of available teachers. It's a hugely challenging job. So the idea that one person can do it better than these boards, I really question. But at the very least, that is elitism, is it not? It's not populism, I would say so. It's not power to the people. It's power to Queen's Park.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just again, to catch up those who, because we're moving really fast here, but let's just talk about it quickly. At some point, I'm sure we might have a dedicated episode or a feature about the Near North stuff. We've heard about it before. We'll see how we can make this work. But in relation to that, from what I was reading earlier, the school trustee system is like one of Canada's longest standing forms of democracy. I was reading back before. I think it went to. I'm gonna get the year wrong, Professor, but I'm gonna try to cite this here properly. I think it's like 1818 or something.
That sounds about right to me. I don't know it either, so don't worry.
So that predates like Confederation. Right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's really old, and so for Canada's largest province and Canada's maybe most like global premier, Ontario's most like representative person, to kind of go ahead and continue to remove, facets of what might be considered democracy in our land from the people and going towards more of that elitism part. It's weird because going back to his comment and going to Bill 33, Bill 60 again, like I used the term earlier, the mask is slipping.
Yeah,
right.
And
I have been. This is me, my soapbox. Allow me to stand on it. I think it's twofold, but I think the biggest reason why Doug Ford keeps winning is because he's calling elections that feel like layups and not jump shots. right?
Oh, well, yes. Certainly the last two elections, I would say that he knows that the opposition parties are, well, not quite in a shambles. The last
Disorganized
election,
is a good way of putting
but
it.
Disorganized. Certainly their fundraising has been terrible.
Awful.
He has a tremendous advantage. And indeed, even though he did slightly worse in the seat count last time around than he did the election before, I think he lost 3 seats from the time before. Pretty insignificant. He still has a majority government. I think his share of the popular vote increased. So, he's really done these sorts of things. But relatedly, actually, what he has just said, and speaking again about this tension between populism and elitism, is that he's thrown away fixed election dates. Okay, so fixed election dates was something that was brought in Ontario, and in fact, federally before that, I think Stephen Harper brought it in 2007, was that you could not have an election past 4 years. Now, there is some interesting tension. The Constitution says one thing, you have to have an election within 5 years, and then you can have an election within 4 years according to the legislation, both provincially and federally, okay? But you're not supposed to call an election by that law, at least the spirit of the law, until that date, 4 years. I can't remember, what is it, the second Tuesday in October. I just kind of pulled that out of my hat. It might not quite
Somewhere
be that.
there.
Yeah, and he's decided that that does not suit him. And again, that is a concentration of power in the Premier's office because, just as you say, it is an astute politician that knows when to call an election. And these fixed election date laws really took that arrow out of their quiver. But now Doug Ford has rolled back that populist legislation that was, in fact, promoted by Stephen Harper, our last Conservative prime minister, and he's decided that he wants that power himself. Now, technically speaking, he always did have that power, but I will put that aside. Indeed, again, he's just simply said that legislation does not suit me because, I'm the elite premier of the province of Ontario, and I'll decide when we call an election, and he'll be looking at the polls and deciding, okay, when do I get my new mandate?
It just feels unfair.
Well, it's unfair to the opposition parties, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's a huge advantage. If you're in office and you can call an election when you think the polls suit you, of course, that's a great advantage to you. The opposition parties can't say, we want an election now because we're ahead in the polls. No, the opposite will happen. The premier will say, no, not an election now because you'll win, right? So, again, is that democracy in action? Not so much.
Not
Again,
really.
It's more elitism, I would say. Yeah, very much so.
And I think a lot of the critical response from, all these stories has been, okay, well, and I saw something, I forget what it was, maybe the Globe and Mail. It may have been comparing the tactics and strategies recently from Ford to Trump and how he's becoming very similar in style now, whereas he's won, 2 re-elections, he's won the original election. He has all these different, bows in his quiver now that he's taken or changed. What's his next game, right? What's next for Ford? Because, it would take a lot, I would imagine, blowback-wise for him to lose support or to at least motivate or get gas in the tank for his political opponents to get motivated.
Well, that's right. Well, the Liberals, of course, need a leader. And Miss Stiles, Marit Stiles, is it Merit Stiles?
I think it's Merit Stiles.
It's Merit Stiles.
Of the NDP.
I always say that wrong. I think she's been quite effective as the opposition leader, but certainly hasn't gotten much inertia or a bump in the polls. In fact, I think the polls I've seen, for what they're worth, the NDP is actually quite a bit behind the Liberals now, even if the Liberals are adrift. So he's in the catbird seat, no doubt about it. He is still mighty in his position as premier. Politics is a funny thing, though. If the Liberals manage to get a dynamic leader with a new kind of voice, with new ideas, things can turn on a dime. And, of course, we saw that federally with Mark Carney just swooping in and becoming prime minister. So anything could happen. What's on the agenda now, again, I think really does speak, though, to Doug Ford's base, because he was just talking about a new piece of legislation related to bail reform.
Right.
I think a lot of voters in Ontario are frustrated with the way the justice system functions in our province, allowing repeat offenders back out in the street time and time again. And again, I don't want to be insensitive to these issues, which are quite complicated. But again, just from a political perspective, that's a real winner for him. So maybe he is sort of saying by being tough on crime, which is generally a good conservative position to take, he might get his mojo a bit back. Because I think, what he's been doing lately and some of the scandals that have been associated with his government have put a chink in his armor a bit, even though, again, there's no opposition party really to take advantage.
Yeah. It's odd. I for a long time since his reelection, I thought okay, he's going to be around for a while. This is just something we have to get used to. Obviously, I'm not a Ford voter.
Oh, okay. All right. You let the cat out of the bag.
I mean, I would say I like. Well, I mean, up to this point recently, I can't say this, but I would say he was more of an effective, populist figure than someone like Pierre Poilievre tried to be, and so he was more relatable.
Sure.
In terms of how he was trying to, even if it was somewhat, a unique form of provincial nationalism, where it was Ontario's not for sale hats. I was well, that's neat, but I know what you're doing. This isn't lost on me.
Yeah, but that's just good politics. I wouldn't blame him for that. And he did come out swinging against Donald Trump far more, in fact, than you saw from Parliament Hill or Danielle Smith in Alberta as well, was more conciliatory. And again, it's a bit surprising because broadly speaking, going back to the point about populism, you would sort of say, even though Donald Trump is profoundly unpopular in Canada and Ontario, more popular undoubtedly among conservative voters or progressive conservative voters. And so, by criticizing Donald Trump so loudly, he may be alienating some of his voters. But the question, of course, there would be, where would those voters go? They're not going to vote for the NDP or the Liberals necessarily. So, I mean, there are more conservative parties, marginal parties, I would call them, in Ontario. What is it? The Ontario Blue Party, I think they call themselves. I can't remember now.
Anymore.
Like Ontario Heritage Party, something along those lines. And so maybe they would lose a few hundred votes that way, but not much. So the Captain Canada stuff, the Canada is not for sale, all of these kind of hats and slogans is good politics. It's up there with Make America Great Again, He really is great on the stump, as I said before, and there's a reason why he's won these elections.
Yeah, I was I feel like those voters in particular will probably just hold their nose and continue to vote for Ford, even if they liked Trump, but don't like the other.
But maybe not show up, though. See, that's, of course, always the option. And voter turnout actually has been quite low.
Been pretty sad.
Yeah, in the mid-40s, I think, something along those lines in the last two elections.
Which is the frustrating part.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Absolutely. We talked about voter turnout in the federal election, which was pretty good, I think, from what we can recall.
It turned out okay.
Which is good. I mean, it helps to have I say helps, somewhat comedically. It helps to have an existential crisis and threat to the south of the border to kind of make people to kind of get a little scared.
Yeah.
Which certainly helps. But for Ontario, I still don't know what that's going to be. And so we talk about the shift from populism to elitism and Doug Ford's presence and power in the province. We talk about what might have to happen for him to kind of lose some of that confidence or lose some of that edge. I don't know what the next steps are. It seems like he's going to keep doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Because he clearly has all of his pieces on the board where he wants them. But is there something that we just don't know yet?
Well, look, again, I did mention in passing these scandals that have popped up in his government. Now, again, the Liberals had their fair share of scandals too, so I'm not just picking on the Conservatives. I mean, again, corruption, unfortunately, is part of politics. I always say that to my students when they're aghast that, how dare that politician behave in that way? And I say, have you studied at all? Because that often happens.
It's always a fall.
But this most recent thing about the Skills and Development Fund, we don't quite know all of the details here, but in essence, what's occurred, as has happened before when Ford has been in power, is that it looks as though friends to the government, friends to Ford and his friends have received funding outside of a sort of due process. Let's just put it that way. That an application process was set up. Scores were given to applicants as far as the relevance of their proposal to the funding goals. The highest scoring applications received very little funds, and the lowest scoring applications somehow received the most money. Now, I don't quite know this idea that a strip club got some of this money has popped up. I haven't actually investigated that. That seems rather bizarre to me.
I feel like we probably just won't investigate that one.
Yeah, that's right. We'll leave that one alone. But you can see that that's not good politics, of course, for someone like Doug Ford, that his government and his minister seem to, be rewarding their friends. That's the way it seems to be. I'll be careful to note that that remains to be proven. And I don't believe there's been any criminal charges around this. And on top of it, actually, the minister does have the right to just override any process that had been set up. And I mean, that would be very frustrating if you were one of these applicants who scored high and didn't get very much money or no money at all. But again, that's not illegal. It may be bad politics, but it's not illegal. But those things can add up, and I think that's what happened to the Liberals. Like, it was just one thing after the other. They were in power for a very long time.
Yep.
Dalton McGuinty and then Kathleen Wynne. And, it began to rub people the wrong way. And the reactions to those scandals, I think, were very much dismissive. They were not apologetic.
Yeah.
And Ford, to his credit, and I'm thinking of the Greenbelt scandal, another scandal that goes back a little while, he did apologize. And he basically took it back. He sort of said, I will restore the Greenbelt to as it was. Now, again, there may be more to this story that that we will hear about, but I thought that was very good of him to just sort of apologize. He said he made a promise to leave the Greenbelt alone, and then he broke that promise. So, I mean, that's good politics, that he has that in him, that he can say he was wrong. I did not see that from Dalton McGuinty. I did not see that from Kathleen Wynne.
No.
And in fact, I just was listening to Dalton McGuinty. I think he's got a book out.
Okay.
And he was on a podcast. And he's rather unapologetic as his time as premier. I mean, you got to admire the man's confidence, but read the room, buddy. People are still pissed off, if I may say, about his time in office.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
See, this is so interesting, right, Professor, that we talk about politics. It seems like Ontario is really unique. Like, I feel like comparing it, it's not fair, but I'm going to, because last time we had you, we talked about federal. It seemed very this or that. Whereas Ontario, like, I very much clearly have an opinion, but I would also be remiss to like not acknowledge where Ford and his, troop do well, whether it's strategically or publicly. Which is why, like, when we talk about the whole school board stuff with Near North, it's like, well. I mean, I'm not in a really position to say right this second, because like I used to work for a school board, not Near North.
Okay.
But I used to work for a school board. It's tricky because like the trustees have a certain level of, responsibility, and Near North is a complicated situation because it's such a big, geographically large board. So like when people feel misrepresented or like unrepresented from people like in Parry Sound with the whole mega school thing, which is its own disaster, I get why people get frustrated, especially when it comes to the director and the whole credit card thing. North Bay needs less credit cards. I get the criticism and I get the urge to see things be corrected or represented properly. I just think this might be an overreach. Going back to Bill 33 in terms of like giving one person, like you said, which is very well put, at Queen's Park, who has never set foot potentially in North Bay.
That's right.
In Parry Sound, in Nobel, where these places are being impacted. Yeah. Say, okay, you know what? You're gonna assume the role of all these trustees, and you're gonna do what we feel is right. It just feels disconnected, and it feels again very elite and not very people forward.
Well, yeah, I think we agree on that. This is really tough, though, because, I'm a politically astute person just by my profession. I certainly pay attention. And, again, I'm sure there are people in North Bay and in the surrounding regions that pay attention to who their trustees are than I do. But when I go to that polling booth, I will admit that I am not sure about who everyone is. Yeah. And so it's in part that we're a little disconnected just by the size of this school board, as you mentioned before, and the sort of diverse population that they represent both regionally and in our city itself. And how can they really do that job well is the question. And And how can I vote for them knowing that they have the experience to do the job? I have found, and again, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular, I have found that often people elected to those positions have very little idea about what their job actually is, okay? Some do.
You're speaking of the trustees.
I'm speaking of the trustees, that a lot of people, and again, maybe just a lack of experience and they have to get up to speed, but I've sat in on a lot of trustee meetings. This was now a few years ago, so it's not this particular group of people I'm referring to. And I was quite shocked, I must say, about just how inept a lot of the decisions were.
Okay.
So when this latest problem with the Parry Sound High School came up, I went, more of the same. That somebody is not really paying attention. Now, again, I have to be very careful because I don't know all of the details, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular, but something very bad happened there. Some serious mistakes have been made, some lack of communication. And so my problem is somebody who cares about this community, somebody who likes to participate, and I get this just because I'm a political science professor, even though perhaps I would be a terrible politician. But people do say to me, why don't you run for office, right? And because you know this stuff. And I laugh and say, I'd be terrible at it. Don't vote for me under any circumstances. I tell my wife, if I say I'm running for office, lock the doors and don't let me out, that sort of thing. But the idea is, why would I ever want to do that job? Like, what is it that motivates people to deal with such complicated, important issues that really requires, almost full-time study and, just putting the time in is what I'm trying to say. Our trustees, some of them are retirees, I assume, but a lot of people are, working their other jobs. They have families. They get paid next to nothing for this work.
They don't get paid very well.
Yeah. Yes, I guess they get mileage, which is quite controversial, but it's pretty minimal. And so, who is actually attracted to that job? What is their motivation? And I just think, what we would love to have is the best people in those jobs, and the best people really look at the job and say, no, thanks. And again, I'm not saying I'm the best person. That sounded like I was suggesting that. Far from it. But that, I think, is a real problem. How do you attract the best people, particularly to local politics, whether it's a trustee or even a city councillor? How do you get those people to step up and serve the public interest? It is something that we really don't emphasize in our culture anymore. Maybe at one time, a couple generations ago, that would be something someone would feel a sense of real obligation to do, even if they were, busy with other things. They would even take time off to do this job. But people can't afford it. People don't have the time to do it. And so that's what we get. We get me, who is supposed to know what he's talking about as far as politics goes, going into a voting booth and, guessing on who the best people would be. And I think there's something very wrong with that system.
It's you bring up a good point. I think at the local level especially, I like to think most people do a little bit of homework, a little bit. Maybe,
I do a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. I think when it comes to trustees, I think people often, and maybe I'm making a bold assumption here, routinely forget that it's part of that municipal process.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we forget.
No, we're just not up on it. And again, we're busy with other things. Again, it's not really... It's not really like me whining about this. I hope I don't come off that way.
Oh,
Yeah.
no such.
Yeah.
But I think you also bring up a good point that what's going to motivate people to, or motivate the right people, even if it's more people.
I don't know.
I don't know, because especially now that we're in the wake of this with Calandra and potentially seizing hold of Near
That's
North.
right.
Why would you want to run for that?
Exactly. And
Why would you want
you
it?
get your name dragged through the mud in, whether it's on a podcast or in local media. The comment sections on our local media are vicious to our councillors and trustees. Again, politics is a rough and tumbled sport. Don't get me wrong. You can't be sort of a thin-skinned person to do that job.
No, you gotta be tough.
At a point you kind of say, why bother?
Is this worth it?
Is it worth it? And so I think just our culture really is not well suited to attract the best people to local politics. I don't know the immediate way to solve those problems, frankly. Unfortunately, because the pay is so poor, it may be the case, not always certainly, but maybe the case it's just people who are in a position that they can afford the time and the lack of money to do that job. Somebody else who may be better suited for the job, they just can't. They just can't do it just because it's so time-consuming, at least to do it well, and so poorly paid. Why would you do it? Why would you do it? And I wonder if that's part of the problem here.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not going to change anytime soon with the given circumstances with Ford and his group. They're not likely going to spend money allocating funds to the school boards to pay more for the trustees. That's definitely not going to happen.
But if I can just interject, like
Please.
That is a real bee in my bonnet here, is that when people complain when our politicians get raises, okay?
Yeah.
I say, well, no. What we're doing when we give a living wage, if not a very good wage, to our politicians and our MPPs, and MPs do get paid fairly well, it is that they can afford the time to do that job, right? They can say, well, I can leave, my job, my profession for this period of time. I can risk it on top of it, right? Because you could be in office for a year. You could leave your job. You can be in office for a year. There could be another election called, and then what, right? It's a bit of a gamble. And I've
100%.
had actually colleagues who have thought about running for office, and they sort of balked at it because they said, no, it's just too risky. So it's good that we pay our politicians well. And again, I wouldn't expect, a municipal councillor or someone in a board of trustees to get paid very much because it's not really supposed to be a full-time job. But I do believe these issues have become so complicated and difficult, it becomes a full-time job to do it properly. And would we be willing to pay higher taxes to pay our politicians more? I don't think that's a winner for any politician, but I think it does make sense.
I agree. I think you bring up a good point. And ultimately, I thought you were going to go somewhere else with this, but I think it's a really good way of putting it. But I always come back to it. I'm going to be critical. I'm going to strap in and be
All right,
critical.
let's hear it.
Let's do this. I think a lot of these things that we are criticizing Doug Ford for,
Yeah.
in terms of especially with things that he's trying to fix, I would say a lot of the times, and most recently, especially comes to the educational stuff, and especially it comes to the housing stuff, are also problems that he kind of helped create.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
That's very true.
Like, he's not looking at spending any more money into, helping teachers. He's not putting any money towards, putting forth anything in terms of healthcare.
Yeah.
He's kind
Well,
of
let's put it
starving
this way.
the beast, right?
He's not putting enough in to keep things going,
Right.
at a high level of quality.
I agree. I think that's kind of my point is that it feels very Band-Aid like. It doesn't feel, despite being progressive conservatives, these moves don't feel that progressive, which is ironic considering their political affiliation. I understand that, but do you know what I mean?
Well, no. Okay. The history of the term progressive conservative is
Yes.
a little. It's
it's
not
a little
quite as you're
misnomer.
suggesting.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
But people often say that. Yes.
Yes.
That he is, and Ontario Tory governments have been more progressive, at least in recent history, than
Still
the
wouldn't call it
federal.
progressive, but yes.
And then the federal conservatives who dropped
Yes.
the progressive, of
Name
course,
entirely.
after
Yes.
they, realigned or united with the Reform Party or the Alliance Party.
Right.
So, Anyhow, I won't bore you with that.
No.
history.
That's a whole different episode. I
Yeah.
was more or less making a
Okay.
pun and a joke, but
Yeah.
I think if you were to put money into, understanding you want to see better results in schools, well, okay, make sure there's, the classes aren't quite so full. Students
right.
typically have a better learning experience, better engagement, better attention to care per the teacher or the instructor when you have less people in the room. And so why wouldn't you help that out?
Well, that's it, but that costs money.
That costs
of course,
money.
you have to build schools with more classrooms, and you have to hire more teachers and support staff to make that happen. And again, it kind of goes back to the point about populism, and I can kind of understand this.
Let's do it.
That a starting teacher doesn't make that much money, but a teacher that has, let's say, 20 years of seniority actually makes a fine living and has an excellent pension, and that's part of the attraction people might have to that profession.
Mm-hmm.
If you're somebody, let's say, working in a steel plant or an auto plant, and who has been laid off because of these tariffs that have popped up, you might look resentfully with grievance to people that are getting paid by the taxpayer and saying, well, I want some of that money for myself, or why do they get that cozy position, right?
Right.
And so if Doug Ford wants to keep those voters, in his roles, voting for him, he says, well, I can't give the teachers or the nurses or the doctors, or the professors, certainly his least favorite profession, any more money at all because, these other people are struggling. And it does make some sense. Indeed, lots of Ontarians are struggling to pay the bills. And indeed, an auto worker and a steel plant worker do fine, but there are lots of people, let's say, even in the service industry, who are not doing very well. Why should these professions, why should these public servants, I use the term broadly, get paid so well by the taxpayer's dime, and everyone else is just struggling? And I think that's the dynamic that's going on. And so, the criticism of the teachers' union or the nurses' union is sort of part of that. And so when we ask for smaller class sizes, of course that's better for our education system. But he turns that into some sort of fight with the teachers' union. This is just the teachers' union that wants more and more and more. And I can't afford it anymore because I have to take care of my base voter, right? And so that's the unfortunate dynamic. Meanwhile, of course, our schools are getting more crowded and need renewal. Everyone agrees with that, but where's the money going to come from?
That's a good question. I think we'll end on this. We'll add one more question to you, okay. Professor. Thanks again for joining us. But let's talk a bit about the whole which way is he going to fall? He's on the edge of the knife. Is he going to go towards populism more, or is he going to end up staying in elitism? After everything that's happened with Doug lately, and I'm sure there's more to follow. I mean, he loves being in the public eye.
Yeah.
What's next? Is he going to try to keep both, or is the mask off now?
Well, that's kind of tough here. His relationship with the new prime minister, I think, is really important. And these sort of long-term major projects that are being announced, certainly Ontario wants to be part of that. So I think, if he can actually strike some major deals with the federal government, bring more jobs, manufacturing jobs, which has done very poorly, actually, since these tariffs have hit. If he can turn that around, I think he'll be okay. But if manufacturing continues to decline, and we're talking again about steel and car plants, this sort of thing, I think he'll be in considerable trouble, right? Because in a way, that's what his sort of brand is, bringing jobs to Ontario, growing the economy. If that doesn't happen, all of the rhetoric, all of the good image, all of the potholes being filled is not going to do it for him. I think, what was it? James Carville, Bill Clinton's campaign advisor, famously said, "It's the economy, stupid." Yeah. This was his sort of thing to remind Bill Clinton of what matters to people, and I think that's still true. So if the economy, starts improving, if these tariffs don't bite as hard as they seem to be, and Ontario is very effective, particularly Southern Ontario, and things start turning around, and there's a long time till the next election, right? Potentially, at least, I think 2029 we can wait to.
So long.
I think he can hang on and continue on the course he's at. But if things start going bad and he starts scrambling, I think the tide will turn against him. How that relates to our discussion of populism and elitism, I'm not so sure. I think he campaigns as a populist and, for the most part, governs as an elitist. I mean, just one more thing, even though I know we're ending.
No, please.
Think about the strong mayor powers that he passed, I think that was in his last term. The strong mayor powers just completely circumventing city councilors, right? That the mayor can sort of stand up and pass budgets all by themselves. Again, that's a centralization of power. That is elitism by definition. And so, a lot of the legislation that I've pointed out here kind of has that trend.
Yeah.
The amalgamation of the conservation authorities as well. Yeah. Another example of just taking power away from local communities and local people and amalgamating it, centralizing it. Is he going to continue doing that? Is there a breaking point when Ontarians say enough's enough? We want some power back to the people? Perhaps, but again, as I keep on saying, he's a great politician. He's been elected 3 times with majority governments. So he'll just sort of say, ignore all of those things I've actually done. Let me tell you what I'm going to do. And then he'll talk as a populist again, and he'll get a 4th term.
We'll see. I hate this story. I've seen it 3 times already.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Anyway, we'll keep flipping through the pages. Professor, thanks for joining us again.
My pleasure.
Your insights are always insightful and helpful and fun, and you bring a really good balance to understanding some of the nitty-gritty stuff and some of the historical stuff. So again, thank you again. We'll have you in soon. And Doug, if you're watching, call into the show. We'll love to have you on. But I really doubt that would happen. But again, Professor, thanks again.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening or watching the Echo Essentials podcast. My name is Chris Pekarsky. Let us know what you think about the episode. Give us a comment, give us a like, a share, subscribe to the show, of course, subscribe to the channel, follow us on wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, if you can as well. Check us out on our website and subscribe to the Echo Essentials newsletter. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.